Good morning, everybody. I'm making this video right after the one titled The History of Everything, and I meant to try and cover as much as I could in 1 hour. And I was almost done, and I realized there was an hour limit on the videos of this phone, which was fine. So it actually was 1 hour. I've taught all that before. I wanted to do a little bit more. I was trying to cover, just to give a little apologetic, that's what you call that, for the Christian faith, for the reality of God. And when I was talking about, I'm remembering, because I didn't even review it yet. I always review them in the morning, then I write that whole post that you see, the writing, I do all that in the morning. So this morning, when I'm done with this, I'll be working on one, I review, and that's how I do it. But I wanted to distinguish, I'm remembering right now, the fifth day, God makes fish and all. Everything, life is coming from the water. And man is created on the sixth day. And man is distinct from all the other creation because man is created in the image of God. Okay? And it would have been too much for me to try to do the differences that Christians have on the age of the earth. And some Christians, not the majority, but some also believe like that biological evolution is a tool that God used. Okay? Theistic evolution, I think we refer to that. I don't hold to that. Okay? There's a lot of questions, but some that make that argument also will say that even in Genesis, the Bible is backing up what science has learned, those who do believe in that. I don't hold to that because there's a lot of scientific, I could do the whole thing on the question about evolution in the sense of what I'm discussing. That in Scripture, God, when it says God creates, and God, I showed you how when the sun rises and falls, later on that became a debate in the Copernican revolution. I mentioned that on that other video because Galileo, through the telescope, the invention of the telescope, right around the 1500s. That was a great time of change. That's why I wanted to cover Renaissance. You got Renaissance about 1200s, 1300s. You had a couple of Renaissances, okay, but in general, it was the renewal of the finding of a lot of the writings of the philosophers that were not around for years, and men like Aquinas and others. In the 1200s, a great Catholic theologian, angelic doctor, Thomas Aquinas and others, and he tried to, now that these writings came back from Aristotle and others, and Aquinas is famous for what you call Aristotelianism, meaning he tried to say, okay, let's try to define some of the doctrines of the church using the ancient Greek thinkers, and the Renaissance was a revival. Okay, it was the catchphrase for the Renaissance was ad fontes, which meant back to the sources. So they were kind of going back to some of the original sources. And then you had a man by Desiderius Erasmus in the 1400s, and he was a great Catholic critic of the Catholic Church, smart man, and he'd write a lot of writings that were very critical of the church. But he did it in an interesting way, satire. Look, I know how to pronounce all those words. I have difficulties the last few years with that. So he would criticize the church, right, justly so, but he was part of the Catholic Church. So, and he did a great thing, because back to the sources, these Renaissance men, let's go back to the sources, and the first interpretation of the New Testament in Greek, going back, because many of the Catholics were using the Latin version from St. Jerome in the 200s AD. During that period of time, 300 AD, Jerome wrote had a very popular version, one of the church fathers, called the Latin Vulgate. So many of the priests and men that were trained in the church at that period of time were all using And it was not that bad, but it wasn't as good as, quote, Ad Fontes, back to the original. So you had Erasmus, this Catholic man, do the first new translation from the Greek. And so this was very interesting because this would lead up, this is all in the 1400s, right into the 1500s. And Martin Luther, the great German reformer, when I taught the history of the Reformation, of course he's teaching as a Catholic man as well, out of Germany, Martin Luther, out of the famous story of the whole Reformation, and Wittenberg, and so he's teaching his students and teaching the book of Romans, which the key theme was justification and righteousness of God by faith, and that sparked such a what we refer to as the Reformation, and I've covered the whole history of that, but that I wanted to kind of include a lot of that. I've done it before, and so we were searching for truth, and Luther and Erasmus, their letters went back and forth because people thought once the Reformation started was the Protestant breaking away of the Roman Catholic Church. People thought surely Erasmus would jump in to it and also revolt. But he said no. He said, I don't think it's worth throwing off all of the historical fathers and all. And Luther didn't throw them all off per se. He still agreed with the church fathers and many of the church councils. But the debate was, when it came down to the nuts and bolts, are we going to go by Scripture to determine doctrine, or are we going to go by what the church fathers said? Now, all of this was good, and Erasmus stayed within the church. Of course, Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, we called them the magisterial reformers. They broke away. So that's the whole kind of history I didn't get to do. This might be like the history of everything, one more hour or something like that. And then you led up to the great, many of the philosophers and thinkers, and I taught philosophy, Kant and Locke and all, and they were debating on the whole structure of society, okay? Because for many, many years, and then the church would break away, but for many, many years, society itself found a stability from the church. The Catholic Church provided a great stability, and when people had questions, and of course, some said, but you should always be able to question what you're being taught or told, which I also believe. But yet, when there was this great breaking away, Germany would break away, King Henry too, but not in the same way. King Henry VIII was not a Protestant. Yes, the Church of England was established when he broke away from Rome. Some of you know the history of why, about trying to get the annulment and also to get remarried. But the Church of England stayed very much with the sacraments and very much with the church. And Henry VIII actually wrote in defense, before he broke away from Rome, now you're talking England, he wrote a defense of the sacraments, the seven sacraments of the Catholic Church, and he butted heads with Martin Luther, because he was not going the road of Luther. But what Luther also gave to what was going on in the political realm at the time was the states, nation states, if you will, various countries, to have independence. That some of them jumped in with the Reformation, Protestants, just because they were like, oh good, we are not going to be under Rome anymore. We want our own independence. So that played a big role. And then you had the development of the thinkers, okay? And so this was coming up to the time on the last video I really jumped all of this. Skipped a lot of it, though I've taught it in the past. And then the thinkers, and what you had men like even Marx, Karl Marx, debating on, okay, the real challenge to how things are structured. And Marx and Engels, and Communist Manifesto, okay? And society's grappling, and then philosophy, and then you come up with Freud and others. Did Christianity and the church impose all of these morals on people? And is that why there's all these psychological problems, okay? And Freud would believe that We need to remove these restraints on people in the area of sexual morality, and just everybody practice what they want. And he thought maybe that's the answer. And so people were challenging, and it brought us all the way up into, which I did mention on the last video, the time of the great scientific breakthroughs of the 20th century. I teach some of those physics in that video post, QM, called Quantum Mechanics. Okay, I kind of get into that. But all of these things were leading up to the reality that as man advanced in his knowledge, there was this big belief that as we all got smarter, that we would throw off all of these, quote, fables of like Genesis. In the beginning, God created by speaking. Surely, the critic would say, that's a bunch of silly fables. No, science today, actually, by the laws of logic and science, that is the only actual answer for why there is even anything. I'm telling you that's true. Because what we understood in the 20th century and the great breakthroughs of the physicists like Einstein and others, we understood that there was a time when there was nothing in the physical realm at all. Look at this. See the wood, see the sheetrock, see the trees, see me, see the floor, see the couch. Science showed us there was a time there was nothing. Nothing. And once science showed us that, and we refer to that as the Big Bang Theory, the only explanation, because science shows us that you can never get something out of nothing. That is not a religious belief. That's a scientific belief. So science showed us that the cause, science teaches us what's called the law of cause and effect. Meaning, if you see an effect, and in this discussion the effect is everything here, everything, creation, and if you see that, there has to be a cause for that. Because it is scientifically impossible. I didn't do Darwin. I was going to do a little bit of Darwin, okay, on evolution. And I was going to cover that. I've covered that in the past. But a big debate at the time of Darwin, which is the 1800s, and the whole theory of evolution, a big debate was, is there such a thing called spontaneous generation? Spontaneous generation simply meant life itself springs from nothing, okay? A lot of people believe that. That was a key belief in the theory of evolution. People should never forget this. When Darwin said, even though Darwin did not explain, he was not saying, he was just saying the species evolved over time, okay? He wasn't, but, and I don't agree with that, because science has disproven much of what he had said. But I do want to say, they do experiments, a famous experiment, and cheesecloth proved them wrong, okay? Meaning, they noticed that if you had like rotten meat and you left it out, and all of a sudden maggots and things, or maybe you would find, maybe they thought, look, we found that this happened actually. They saw like puddles in the street. And then over time you'd see little fish in those puddles. Well, what they thought was happening, whether the food that was left out and worms, there's actually a verse in the Bible that says it bred worms. And when you read that verse, this is dealing with what I said in the last video, phenomenological language, meaning the Bible describes things at times just the way they look or seem. It's not always giving you all of the scientific technique, but it's not contradictory. Because the Genesis account, in the end, has to be true, even if you don't believe it by faith. Because everything had to come from something. And that something had to be non-material. That something had to be outside of the material realm. The scripture says God is spirit. That something had to be very powerful. And Christianity teaches God is omnipotent, has all power. Had to be very smart. God is omniscient, knows all this. Science tells us it had to be something. That's why if you follow the videos, Dawkins alien. The atheist Dawkins came up with an alien, which some other being did it all, because he too knew whether he was caught in that little interview. It happened about 10 years ago. So when they looked at, oh, maybe life just springs up from nothing, spontaneous generation. Look at all the fish in the water that in a puddle. How did that happen? Well, then later you realize birds and things transfer land on things. The maggots, you get the flies, land and all. Spontaneous generation is not true. Okay, no scientific, no university or anywhere, Oxford, Harvard, Cambridge, and nobody teaches, quote, spontaneous. They teach it not realizing they still believe in this, because many of them who reject it, because we know that that doesn't happen anymore, but many of those guys still hold to everything coming from nothing, which is the same theory of spontaneous generation, which is not true. We know that, but they hold to it because they have no explanation. The atheist Christopher Hitchens, I had his books. One, I've read them, but I don't have them anymore. But Hitchens knew a lot of this, though he was an atheist, and he used to try to defend for atheism. But some of those guys, even the atheists, they started seeing, wait a minute, the Christian church has a great history of intellectuals who argue for the faith, and many of their arguments are real, the ones I'm making to you in this last couple of days. So how could Genesis be recording that story that seems like a fable to the atheist? That God spoke, that a non-material being spoke, and all things came into existence. Science shows us it doesn't take you right to that point there, because the scientists can only take us right to the point where we call it the point of singularity. Okay, everything started right here. And if you ask him these debates, the atheist, the intellectual atheist, if you ask him, and what did you have before the point? They can't answer that. And so, the Christian thinker, many Christian scientists, look, science came out of the church. The scientific method came out of really the Catholic Church, but the church. And so that's the only explanation. Believe it or not. All right, I did, so I filled in a little bit for you. And the reason evolution is so questionable. Look, there was a famous family called the Leakey family. And one of the daughters, very famous in the field of fossils and science, very famous, Leakey. And even the daughter said many years ago, not as far as I know, they're not Christian or didn't do it from a Christian view, but they said, oh, we have such a huge problem with evolution. And one of them, just one, was all of the fossil evidence, all of it, says no. We need a bunch of fossils. There's thousands, millions of fossils that are supposed to, we should be finding, showing that species did indeed evolve. It's missing. The fossil evidence just is not there, and that's true. It's not there. So the evidence does not show us that all this took place through a very long process of many hundreds of thousands of years. The evidence does not show that. And you say, John, you're unscientific. No. And there are scientists who will say what I just told you. And they're not saying it. There are some who are not believers who will also agree with what I just said. And some of them, when they try to say, wait a minute, we have a lot of problems with evolution, and that is that one area I'm just mentioning. And many of them are shot down, like, oh, you're an idiot. The whole, like, global warming debate. I heard Bernie Sanders on the news last night say, he criticized Trump. He said, living in the dark ages and all. I wrote a post. I don't know if I could even find it when I searched. But it was written by it was a Catholic scientist, by the way, from a Catholic intellectual site called First Things, many years ago. And he just did, he's a physicist, and he just did a thing that basically questioned some of the science on global warming. You say, are you a global warming denier, John? No, not in that complete sense. Because obviously, even in Scripture, we have the testimony that man, in Revelation, there's a judgment upon man because he destroyed the earth. So, yes, it's very possible that humans, because of the Industrial Revolution, a lot of these things, could create havoc within the earth. That's even a biblical truth. But there were some questions. I did that post a while back. And when I was listening to Bernie Sanders on the news last night, I thought, you talk about those that are questioning some of the science of global warming, and you're just referring to them as ignoramuses, idiots, and I guarantee you, if I had a debate in 10 minutes, not that I'm so smart, but I would have brought up, did you know what the CO2 levels were historically? Do you know? He doesn't know any of that. So don't just assume the other side's stupid. The evolution side was so sure that when they saw crap on the ground and maggots coming out of it, they said, those maggots popped into existence from nothing. And the Christians who said, that's not true, they mocked them. And those evolutionists who said, see the little fish in the pond? They popped into existence from nothing. And the Christians said, that's not true. And the evolutionists said, you're an idiot. You're an ignoramus. Because this is science. This is spontaneous generation. Well, who's the ignoramus now? Because you were fools believing that. The Scripture says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And in my debates, the people that think they're so intellectual, Stephen Hawking and others, they're not. And in a big way, they've duped a lot of people. Okay? And there were people that were arguing for certain things. And science is, the history of science is a wonderful history. But people should know that there were times where the whole paradigm changed. That everything they thought was true at one point scientifically, just within a period of 100 years, everything changed. They used to think the age of the earth was so much different. Many, many things have changed, okay? Many things in science. And science is a wonderful field. All right, let me see. How long did I go? I got the hour limit now. I don't know if I mentioned this. I was going to read a little. This will tag on to the last video, okay? I mentioned on the other video, I remember this, I didn't review it, about the $200 thing. I've been talking on AA recently, and I haven't really meant to or intended to. But it's maybe the Lord kind of is bringing that up just as discussions go. But, my friend David Martin, who I love David Martin. I've not seen him in about a month. But I used to sit here when I helped David with the halfway house. And we started a little halfway house, I guess for a couple of years. And I would go over there, and it was we did it, by renting a upstairs apartment. I went over there the other day. I almost had a meeting with a bunch of guys sitting on the porch. I said, I used to do a halfway house here. A bunch of, you could say gang guys right in the bed area. I thought, I could probably done a meeting with those guys. But I'd sit here and read the Bible. And I used to get up early. Today I still do. I got up at 3:30 today or something like that. I didn't want to teach. And I was praying. And even when I got up, I had about 3 hours or more maybe in prayer. I said, it's so much nicer, Lord, to really not have to talk. And I said, today we'll just pray. We'll just be in your presence. I said, but if you want, and right at the end of the prayer, I thought, okay, I'll do it. And I was sitting there with David Martin, sitting here by myself. David was not here. But I used to have a Bible verse that I'd give to the halfway house. Every week, a chapter or verse, so David would text me and say, what's the chapter we're supposed to read for the week, John? And I would just share one chapter that I was doing all my little home meetings at the same time. And so it would be like a certain chapter. And one morning, I was surprised because David slept in late. I used to show up at 7 to go to halfway house, everybody's sleeping. I'm like, man, you guys got to start getting up. You can't be sleeping in until 10:30, 11, and think you're going to be successful at anything. Proverbs teaches that. You don't have to get up at 3 and 2, but I mean, at least minimum. Look, if I get up after 6, forget it. I feel like I backslid. Like, oh no, the sun's out. I have to see the stars. I see them every day, and I just saw them just a little while ago. So, get to the point, John. Your bipolar is messing us up on your videos. So, he texts me at 4 in the morning, something like that, and I'm sitting here reading the Bible and listening to rock music, because I was praying. Sometimes, I haven't done it in a while, but I'd have some of the old music on, believe it or not. So I get a text early in the morning, and David he says, brother, I need $200, because he lost an apartment and got into government housing, still in it, because he has a disability for real, a lot of back problems, almost died from heart surgery. He's not a scammer on that, okay? But they moved him from one apartment to another, and I helped him. I even bought some of the guys one day that I was doing meetings with in Kingsville, Emmett, some of the original group. We helped them move and stuff. Or I helped Emmett move one day as well. So we did things. And I said, I don't have 200, brother. He wasn't asking, but I kind of knew that's what he meant. And I just basically, but then I said, brother, I can't help you, but maybe I'll see you later, one of those things. And I was surprised he was up at 4 in the morning. So he texted me back. He said, okay, that's all right, brother. He said, what's the chapter for today or the week? And I was reading James. Now, it was either James chapter 1 or chapter 2. So if you heard, I've told a story before. It's a real story. If I get the chapters wrong or something, it's not that I'm making things up. I'm remembering. But it was either James 1 or 2, because I was reading the letter of James. And this is not a lie. I know David wasn't lying. So I texted back, and like 10 minutes later, he texted me back. Now, initially, he said, you would never believe this. So I'm not making the stories up. He said, you would never believe this, John. I opened up to James 2 or 1, whatever you told me, and I found $150. I hid in the Bible to hide it from Jackie, his girlfriend, who relapses a lot. And he forgot. It might have been in there for a year or however long. But then later he even told me, because I told the story once with the 150, and then later he told me, no, actually it was 200, that he had miscounted. I said, well, it's kind of important. That was the exact number you needed, brother. But I felt these were signs, because I was trying to tell him, look, God works in many ways, David, and I know you're very big in AA. And so I felt maybe God even gave him a little sign like that. Not that I was challenging I just had a problem. In Christian, the movement of Christianity, the historic church, even the other evangelical, more independent churches, all of that is a great, great worldwide movement that's been around for 2,000 years. And so many have found salvation. It's a great movement. And in the 1900s, a good man by the name of Bill W., he also started a movement, like there have been many movements. And for the good parts that it does for people is good. But I've met so many people that anybody that's outside of that movement, whether people like myself who are sober now, I've not drank since my clean date, which is January 3rd of 2013. It's 3.5 years now, okay? But many of my friends that were in that, still in it, they actually looked at everybody else that's kind of outside of it as, I have friends that have relapsed and still doing the sponsors, still doing the steps, relapsed and they will look at me, some of them, and say, you're in rebellion, John, because you're not sponsor. I said, brother, but the goal is to be clean, but and many of I just tried to say, never, whether it's a church movement, a cult thing that we refer to in certain branches, that a lot of scholars and all are getting away from that term. Whenever you're in a particular group, many Christian churches have this. I was in a good church, but it was a fundamental independent Baptist church. And a lot of these problems were also in that particular branch of Christianity. Independent, fundamental, premillennial, good people, okay? But a lot of these signs that you see that are, cultic in a sense of everybody outside, there's something wrong with all the other people, shunning people that, AA kind of does things like that, family members. I will not talk, I've had friends who've said, other people have told them, their son maybe relapsed, but he still wants to talk, or, I don't know, you just shun those, and I'm like, ugh, a lot of problems. Okay. History of everything. Oh, and then the joke, let's see. All right, the washing machine broke the other day, and then this will be 30 minutes. I don't like talking for an hour. So I had to go do laundry one day, and I thought, oh, that's great. I'll go to one of the laundromats, maybe the one I used to take Pops to. But then I went to another one, and but I'm a little, people can tell, okay. So I'm like, I got to get change. Let me just, some of the stores you don't get cash. I'll just go get a 20 from Wells Fargo Bank. That'll make it easy. And then I'll get a stop, get my cigarettes, and I'll break the 20. But I forgot to stop, so I go to the laundromat with the 20. And then I walk in with the 20 thinking, oh, I forgot. I needed to go get fives and singles for the change. I haven't done laundry myself at a laundromat in years. I've taken Jimmy and others. So I walk in, and there's a few ladies there. I'm like, oh, I forgot. They're like, I said, I wonder if it takes, will it take a 20? Will I be able to, get change for a 20 at the coin machine? And the lady, she was helpful. Oh, yes, it takes up to 20s. Oh, great. And I didn't think. And I put the 20 in, and it was like I hit the jackpot at Vegas. All the quarters, and I'm there like, oh, no, I don't need $20 of quarters. And these people, these poor ladies are probably thinking, ooh, this guy is, I wasn't mad, but I was like, no, it's giving me all quarters. And now I got $20 of quarters, and I just needed $2 to do the wash. That was it. The dryer works, so I figured I'll do the wash, I'll take my drive, and then just dry them in the house. So I go to the little store next door anyway. I had to run a few errands. It's right there by where Lowe's is, the construction place. I got to go get some cement to fix this. And then I go to Lowe's. I'm thinking, oh, I bought a bag of cement for $3. I'm like, oh, I'll just use quarters. I got to get rid of it. And then I forgot. I ran the card in Lowe's. I said, oh, I wanted to pay with the quarters because I got $20 of quarters. Everybody's like, what is this guy talking about? And then I went to the little Stripes, the little corner store, and I told the lady, I said, oh, let me get 2 packs of cigarettes, and I said, look, and I explained the story to everybody, I got $20 of quarters, I don't need it. I said, so I'm going to get the 2 packs and pay with quarters. Look, she was like an Indian lady. She kind of looked at me like she didn't want it. Look, I've seen people pay with nickels and pennies. Quarters ain't that bad. It would have been like $10 a quarters, would it? And then I still used part of the card. But she took out the quarter rolls, said, well, you'll have to roll them. I said, look, I'm going to put the $10 here, or the quarters, dear. If you don't want to take the 10, I wasn't that mad. But she didn't want to roll them. She was like telling me the only way I'll take $10, is you have to roll them. I didn't roll them, and she took it. And she started but she seemed a little, B-I-T type, C-H-Y. I never curse in videos. So that was the little thing. And then I still got quarters, and I don't like having a lot of change because, when I was up this morning, I have a sweet cat. And this sweet cat was kind of one of my daughter's friends moved away, and some things happened, and so we kind of adopted. And this sweet cat, now, she was scared here for a while, but now she likes me. I feed her. I just fed her just a minute ago. Sometimes you hear her crying. And now she learned how to get in my hammock when I'm in it, which is okay. But whenever this little cat sees me sitting in any of my chairs or in the hammock now, she immediately comes and jumps on my lap and all. And my wife came out one day a few weeks ago, and she said, does that cat ever come down from your little treehouse? Because she wanted to pet that cat. And I said, yeah, because I guess my wife came out and the cat is not coming to her. I said, look, I could barely go in the yard without that sweet cat. You know, I kind of hide when I'm going to sit. If I'm just sitting to smoke, I'm going to come back out because she wants to sit on my lap, and I let her, but I'm like, I got to get up in about 10 seconds, hon. But so what's the cat story, John? But when I come out this morning, same way, do my prayers, she spots me, she cries because I feed her. I'm the one that feeds her every morning. And so sometimes I don't get mad at her. But sometimes I ignore her for, I do my 40-minute first of the praying. I pray longer than that, but I'm like, I'm not going to stop yet to feed you. And then I'll finish the rest of my prayer time. But like a kid or a child, cries. So I want this, I want this. And some of the reason I didn't want to keep $20 in quarters, I still got about $4 in quarters, is some of my friends, even Jimmy, one day, you know, I always give change. Sometimes I've given, you know, a 20 to a friend or so, just because I know he's looking like he's had a hard time. But I never have money on me. Normally, I don't. And, you know, it's not just Jimmy, but one day Jimmy would ask me, you know, do you have any change? Do you have any cigarettes, Jimmy? I said, oh, I got some change here in a little envelope. I said, I'm going to just, I had it, and I'm going to give it to one of the homeless guys when I see him in the corner, just on the other side of town. So Jimmy knew that day. I gave him some change, and I've done it. So then he asks every time. And I said, look, Jim, I don't. He says, well, it doesn't hurt to ask. And some of my friends they say, why don't you get a job? Oh, I can't work for 8 an hour, 10 an hour. Hey, but you could spend a lot of time. And it's not just Jimmy. So one of the guys I have not seen in a long time, just a week ago on the other side of town. And I remember once I stopped for gas. He didn't even know it was my vehicle. All the way on the other side of town. He's a street guy. And I remember I left my windows down in the car to go in. It's real, you know, crowded little corner store. Normally I don't leave the windows down, but there was nothing really still. But as soon as that guy sold the car, I mean, he was like shocked that somebody in the middle of broad daylight, immediately looking, like, let's get the change, let's get. And like the cats, give me something. So I didn't want to leave change because it'll be the first thing. Oh, now I know John's going to have change. But without picking one particular person, that all of that, having guys walking around just looking if they could steal, rob, use, do drugs. The jail is real overcrowded. I've discussed some of that. And a lot of that, I'll end with this. Psalms I've been reading. I have Timothy open. But there's some good Psalms I've been reading. Whoso offereth praise glorifieth me, and to him that ordereth his conversation aright, I will show the salvation of God. This Paul teaches, as you have yielded your members as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin, you've become habits of sin, is what addiction is. So now learn to order your conversation right. Learn to form righteous habits. I have many friends. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody. I have pastor friends who just do not pray. Everybody doesn't have to do it. I pray every day. When you hear me say the Monday and Friday intercession, it's not just at least minimum of an hour every morning. The other Wednesday prayer is more of a recovery prayer. But then the Tuesday, I do prayer Tuesday and Thursday. That's where I have prayer. I have the few instruments. Minimum of an hour, and it's got to be early. It's got to be before the sun is up. Whether it's from 3 to 5:30 or 6, or from 4 to 6:30 or so. It's got to start before the sun is up. So that's the pattern. So it's not just now I'm saying that for this. Develop habits of righteousness. Develop habits of righteousness. Those of you that watch the videos see, look, all of this stuff, YouTube and video, look, everybody could do all of this. Develop a habit. Many of us see social media, and it's kind of like a phone addiction where you always text and always call. I don't want to criticize you, but I want to say to my preacher friends, there were days where, look, I used to buy radio airtime for many years. Some of you have done the same. There were days where if people could get their own TV channel, literally, the cost of that to broadcast on TV is very high. We live in a day, thanks to YouTube. Now Facebook's getting into it. There's a few others, Vimeo. You know. We live in a day, though, everybody can have their own TV channel. But because it's so available, it's such a great gift. Everyone can have a YouTube. Every church ministry, everybody that's called to preach, you can have your own TV channel for free. That's what YouTube is. But because it's so good, so free, so available, which in the old days you'd pay hundreds of thousands to have that, then we just use it for little things. Facebook is a great tool. And those that are using it to communicate to friends, it's okay. I'm not criticizing. But look at the tools we have. But it takes some discipline. Okay? It takes discipline. If you want to, what are the keys to having an effective blog or website? I've read that over the last couple of years. You know, what's the best way to? It said there are certain things I had to learn, do bullet points on videos, which I never used to do. So I learned. But one, the main thing that most of the people that are teaching that would say is, but you have to have good content. Okay? If you want 100,000 hits, just to get hits, just to get people to like your pages, but if you're not really communicating or giving good content, whatever it happens to be, on botanical flowers or whatever, that's the main thing. Then once you get good content, and in the area of Christian teaching and all, then make sure it's accessible. But that's the key thing. Okay? Proverbs says, wisdom is the principal thing. Get wisdom. And so today, look at all these verses I have. My righteousness I hold fast and will not let it go. My heart will not condemn me as long as I live. Your office will be peace, your exact is righteousness. Preserve my soul, for I am holy. The multitude of my thoughts within me, that comforts delight my soul. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. Much of that is the discipline and the habit of righteousness. Who so offereth praise glorifieth me, and to him that ordereth his conversation aright, I will show the salvation of God. So throughout your life, I miss not working at the fire department. It's difficult to be retired for me, because I like driving, going out, and that aspect. So now I drive. Yesterday, I drove to my daughter out by Alice, and that was another reason I did like doing those home groups. I liked it, but it was nerve-wracking because I had cops pulling me over a lot. Having guys in the vehicle, it was nerve-wracking. It was causing me, by myself, I don't drink, I don't use it, I could drive anywhere. But that was nerve-wracking. All right, we'll end with that. Okay? Look at some of those verses. Let patience have a perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, lacking nothing. Let God have rule in you, okay? That's recovery. A lot of my friends, I notice, because I've had a lot that they're on the settle your thoughts down. Look, I fast just about every day, because I eat once a day. At 7, 8, never eat before 7 o'clock at night. That's the one meal. But they're trying to make you. It's a form of discipline and self-denial is what that is. It's a form of fasting. Okay. So we got to start with seek ye first the kingdom. Spend time with God. Value that. I didn't wake up today with I can't wait to make the video, or I woke up, okay, today's going to be some time just with God, and hopefully I won't make a video. But if I feel that I should, as the prayer is coming to a close, I'll do one. And then it was about 10 minutes before it came to a close, I said, I'm going to do it. And I said, okay, I'll do it. But I would have preferred to not. So at least get to that. You know, we have to get that aloneness with God. And we're seeing that in the Gospel of John. Many people wanted to commit to Jesus. He wouldn't commit himself to them. Not that you're not going to be hospitable. I'm reading Timothy. You should receive people, and most people have done it. You know, you've seen me do it with over the videos. But the key is in the presence of God. Okay? That's the key. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you. The Lord be gracious unto you and give you peace.